enjoy these pictures from our Interfaith Council's work over the last few years while we're waiting for more folks to join us.
You won. You won. Oh.
Yeah,
Look at that.
wait a minute.
I'm the Reverend Will McGarvey. I'm the Executive Director of the Interfaith Council of Contra, Costa County, and I'll be sharing a little bit about our work that we do and some of the work that we do with Bay Area Interfaith Councils, who are mostly organized by county. San Francisco, Marin Interfaith Council, Alameda Interfaith Council, Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, and the Silicon Valley Interreligious Council as well. Here's Steve's introduction.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the 6th Annual Interfaith Awareness Week. My name is Reverend Dr. Steve Albert, and I'm the Director of the World Interfaith Network. Interfaith Awareness Week is a yearly, week-long celebration begun by the Poway Interfaith team in Poway, California. In 2017, Point, as it's known, has members throughout San Diego County, and we hosted a 5-day NAIN Connect conference in the San Diego area. We held it at the University of California in San Diego, and it attracted over 250 people from 20 different faiths. 77 speakers and presenters provided workshops, lectures, discussions, morning meditations, activities, which included bus trips to historic faith locations, concert in the park, and lots of food. While planning the conference, we contacted the mayors of the cities throughout San Diego County about creating that second week in August during the conference as Interfaith Awareness Week, and to do it in their city. And believe it or not, 14 city mayors and the San Diego County Board of Supervisors proclaimed Interfaith Awareness Week as a time in which we honor and respect all faiths, cultures, creeds, and races, and seek to learn from those who believe equal spiritual opportunity and human rights belong to all people. 1 year later, in 2018, the governor of the state of California proclaimed Interfaith Awareness Week as an annual state celebration. And then 1 year after that, in 2019, the United Religions Initiative asked if they could celebrate the second week in August with us. And their members are located in over 107 countries. Wow. So what we will be celebrating and participating in this coming week will truly be a global celebration.
And we'll come together as a continuation of that celebration. We'd like to do land acknowledgements as a part of our time together as an interfaith council, and often we'll include information about our indigenous siblings. As interfaith councils, we understand land acknowledgements as a transformative act meant to confront our place on native lands and to build mindfulness of our present participation in colonial legacies. As people of various faith traditions and life philosophies, we affirm our responsibility to amplify indigenous voices. We stand in solidarity with local indigenous communities, and we respect local indigenous protocol, including not going to the top of Mount D, which is sacred space for the Bay Miwok, Chochenyo, Ohlone, and the Yokuts peoples. We practice land acknowledgements in order to teach and promote greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights, even here in California, where there are few First Nations that survived the California indigenous genocide and fewer still that gain federal recognition as sovereign states. Our congregations and worship centers are located around the Bay Area on the unceded territories of Chochenyo, Ramaytush, Ohlone peoples, as well as the others mentioned earlier, Karkin, Bay Miwok, Coastal Miwok, and Yokuts. I live on Patwin land, just north of this on the other side of the river. We recognize the historic discrimination and violence inflicted upon Indigenous people in California and the Americas, including their forced removal from ancestral lands and the deliberate and systematic destruction of their community, sacred sites, languages, and cultures. Each of us has a responsibility to oppose all forms of individual and institutionalized racism towards all people, but especially towards Indigenous peoples as fellow peoples of faith who were robbed of their freedom of religious rights until 1973 and their voting rights until 1978. All of the over 750 treaties that they made with our nation have been broken by our federal and state governments. We recognize that the cultural heritage of California begins no less than 23,000 years ago, and that the entire Bay Area rests on evidence of indigenous cultures. The pre-contact indigenous population in California was one of the largest and most diverse in the Western Hemisphere and spoke over 300 native and indigenous dialects, as well as 90 languages. Today, there are approximately 9 indigenous dialects spoken in the Bay Area, and California is home to more people of Native American and Alaskan Native heritage than any other state in the country. There are currently over 100 federally recognized Native American tribes in California, and even more communities and tribal groups, including the Ohlone, who are not currently federally recognized and are seeking that. California has the highest Native population in the country, and Los Angeles and San Francisco have 2 of the largest urban Native American populations in the United States. A lot of the work that we do in relationship with others, and I'm going to just kind of take you through a lot of those relationships with a slideshow for the first half of the presentation, and then share a little bit more of the work that we do together with our Bay Area Interfaith Councils. But our Interfaith Council here in the Northeast Bay, which is kind of where Contra Costa County is, north of Oakland and Alameda County, includes a lot of regional interfaith groups that do a lot of work together, including fundraising for hunger and even started a multi-faith action coalition that is doing very good work on addressing the systems that make people poor and keep people poor, and using faith-based advocacy with our elected leaders to change those systems. And sometimes we're able to come together, but we do have different microclimates, including the Interfaith Council of Rossmore that you heard a little bit about previously. We have an Interfaith San Ramon Valley that gets together and does programming together. We have an East County United. This is us at Father Tom's Interfaith Peace Project at their last center before moving to their current one. And they do amazing work under Father Tom Bonacci's leadership, including installing peace poles in various places around the county. We've done some work on training faith leaders on how to serve veterans better, especially those returning from service. And then, of course, we do get together at least 3 or 4 times a year with all of the leaders of our Bay Area Interfaith Council directors to be together. But there's various kinds of different events that occur in these different locales. And sometimes they're addressing local needs, and sometimes they celebrate different festivals or different seasons, such as these in Rossmore. And at other times, because we're here in the Bay Area, we're able to call upon our partners at the United Religions Initiative, and we were able to have Reverend Victor Kazanjian, when he was executive director of URI, help us understand the conflict going on in Kashmir, and had a special speaker on the plight of Rohingya Muslims and Uyghur Muslims that gave us very good educational programs. Interfaith San Ramon Valley does a lighting of the Hanukkah candles together in a local mall near Black Hawk. And sometimes it's the leaders in our own congregations that are putting on the Women's March. We do have an Interfaith Climate Action Network that does amazing advocacy on behalf of the planet, and being in a region with 5 refineries, 3 power plants, a coke, and others, we are in a highly polluted zone as well. And we do a lot of racial justice work as well with members of our own governing board, such as Reverend Rodney at our MLK Witness, and members of Mount Diablo UU Church and others together. We're in a region that has a lot of open and affirming congregations. And so we do have a Witness Our Welcome interfaith service on the 680 corridor that happens every year. And this moves to different congregations. And it's also an interfaith service. And one of the things that we do in elevating interfaith holy days is have different programs, hearing from women on International Women's Day and other things like that. This was actually one of the last in-person events that we had before COVID. And then since COVID, of course, there's been a lot of other things exposed in our culture that we've needed to work on, especially racism and the police brutality, which has been a specific issue for us, especially in one of our richest communities. There's been multiple murders of people of color by our police that are finally coming to justice in Danville and other places. But it's also an opportunity for us as an interfaith council to share a lot about how we survive, and even sharing a lot of the memes that help us survive together during times like COVID and the other times of struggle as we've been together, and recognizing that what goes on in our county with the multiple deaths in our own county jails might be similar to what's happening in other parts of the country, and being in solidarity with them. We usually open our meeting with a covenant such as this, and we'll have different members of our community read the covenant as a reminder of who we are. Oftentimes when we gather, we'll have a presentation from someone in our community, such as the Lion Center for the Visually Impaired, who had a presentation with us last year, sharing a bit about their mission and how we can work together as people of faith and make sure that the folks that need those services are able to get them. We moved a lot of our meetings online very quickly, and we started a weekly gathering called Meaningful Mondays that we now do monthly. And these days we're using it as a book study of the book Holy Envy by Barbara Brown Taylor, and reading a couple chapters each month and then discussing it together. Normally, we would meet like this in a big circle where we're all able to see each other with some interfaith symbols in the midst of us. But lately, we've been meeting like this, and we've actually tried one hybrid meeting this summer, and we're going to try another one in September, hoping that COVID does go away. But one of the blessings of COVID is that it's given us the opportunity to record a lot of our programs and put them on our channel. And we've been able to get over 100 subscribers to our YouTube channel. And you can see that there's programming, not just from like the big questions that we talked about briefly before, but we're able to even put the recordings of our elected council meetings, Brotherhood Sister events, understanding Northern California Native history and some of the anti-racism programming, transcending trauma and building the beloved community, a lot of these. We've also been able to have some interfaith roundtable conversations about immigration with the number of folks coming from Afghanistan, trainings for our VOAD and our disaster relief, and make these available on those recordings, as well as regional and other kinds of events like our Winter Solstice Meaningful Monday Dialogue and MLK Day service. How to do your food ministries coming back out of COVID, and even some of the music of our Singing Messengers, which is a community chaplaincy of music to seniors. One of the Rossmore does a great job in hosting these big questions, and they'll bring in speakers from various faith traditions. And it's great to be able to have all of these curated in one list where you could just sit there and listen to various people of faith on different topics. But because Rossmore is a retirement community, they have folks that are a little bit more interested in asking some of those big questions of life. I wish we knew ways to be able to get younger people to start asking those questions, to be in conversation with us around those. We did get a grant to be able to do some anti-racism training, and have brought in regional leaders to be able to do that. Reverend Shonda Jaw is actually going to be doing an anti-racism training during our September elected council meetings. Karina Gould from the Sogorea Ate Land Trust did a great presentation on understanding the California Native history and the indigenous genocide here. But we've also done some prayer vigils together where people can come together and be in community listening programs after gun violence, different things like that. And knowing our diversity here, we've even partnered with our own Rainbow Community Center to be able to celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility, to help protect one of the most murdered groups in the United States, to help our own congregations learn to celebrate them rather than denigrate them, as so many in our community do on a regular basis. We come together 2 or 3, sometimes 4 times a year with some retreats, and we've been doing these for the last few years. And the last 2 years, our theme has been nurturing the beloved community. And we were able to get Reverend Dr. Dorsey Blake, who preaches in Dr. Howard Thurman's pulpit in San Francisco. In this retreat, we were able to learn that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was offered this pulpit before Howard Thurman. And it made us wonder, what would the world be like if Dr. King had not gone to Ebenezer Baptist Church in Alabama? And how would the world be different if we didn't have Dr. Howard Thurman and his mystical interfaith teachings there? And then broadening the conversations about how do our different faith traditions talk about nurturing the beloved community. What about Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and his relationship? And then what about the Black Church and our own Reverend Kamal Hassan, pastor at Sojourner Truth Presbyterian Church in West County, gave us a great introduction to the radical Black Church and their liberative theology, as well as Muslims teaching, and we've had Native American teachers and many other traditions expressed in that. Before COVID, we did a lot of our interfaith skills series programs just in person, and I would take like our Diffusing Hatred program on the road, and I taught it in 32 different settings, congregations and libraries and community centers, to folks of faith and folks of no faith, to be able to learn how interfaith skills can help us to be in dialogue with people of other cosmologies and worldviews. A follow-up to that was our Everyday Peacemaking program, and then an introduction to compassionate listening called Courageous Conversations that began as a program inside Rossmore for that retirement community, but we were able to record that as well to introduce folks to that. Our latest program with Father Tom Bonacci is a 4-part series that we put together that's on our website, and you're welcome to use in any of your settings, on coping with nationalisms and really trying to understand the rise of Christian nationalism and white nationalism going on in our country, and trying to get a real sense of how people of faith can think about this in more complex ways to be able to live into this moment. Of course, we do programs on International Day of Peace and have been pointing out how we belong to each other with anti-racism programs, including Black Lives Are Sacred, learning about Juneteenth, cultural mindfulness, what does it take to take on the system, easing suffering with self-compassion from more of a Buddhist perspective, transforming trauma and building the beloved community panel conversation, and then the one I mentioned earlier about the California Indigenous genocide. We do have an interfaith disaster network and encourage our congregations to have emergency plans, but also to have someone trained in their congregation and willing to be CERT trained or to be a part of our county's VOAD. Of course, we've participated and led programs at the Parliament of the World's Religions, and happy to be a part of this gathering here today as well. And then our Multi-Faith Action Coalition that does a lot of our advocacy around addressing poverty and the intersectionalities of race is very much a part of that. And together with them and Faith in Action East Bay, a PICO network, we do our Interfaith Thanksgiving service that we do. We've done it online for the last few years, sometimes with a live stream and sometimes with Zoom. But one of the amazing things that we've done recently, we used to have a homeless shelter that we ran, but when that went away, we decided that we needed to encourage more service between our congregations. So we started a new ministry we call iCare, Interfaith Community Action Revitalization. And this is really a great way that folks in our county, especially from these different parts, East County, West County, South County, Central County, which really are very different geographically separated areas. And because we have so much traffic here in the Bay Area, oftentimes people don't get outside of their own little portion of the county. But our iCare program encourages congregations to come together to do their service projects. And here's a little video introduction to this program.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Moss, and I'm with Dave Longhurst, and we are the co-chairs of iCare, which is a program that's part of the Interfaith Council of Contra, Costa County. iCare is based on the simple idea that all faith traditions share a common belief in caring for those in need, and that when we get to know people of different faith traditions, we learn about their beliefs, they learn about ours, and that's how friendships form. iCare creates opportunities for people of different faith traditions to get together to help those in need in our community. It's truly a chance for us to practice pragmatic spirituality by putting our faith into action.
We select reputable, well-established nonprofits, ask them about their needs, and invite congregations to co-sponsor the project. We have different projects for all sizes of congregations that have various financial resources so that everyone, including individuals, can participate. Once 2 congregational co-sponsors choose a project, we all meet initially to plan out the project and then open up the project to anyone who wants to volunteer.
So the planning, the shopping is necessary, and getting together to actually do the project are all opportunities for people who may not otherwise have met to work together. Many strong bonds of friendship have formed from these projects, and some teams have even chosen to continue to work together on other projects so that they can stay in touch. Of course, those in need in our community benefit from this effort of heart, compassion, and generosity. We hope you're as excited about iCare as we are and will join us in this fun and fulfilling work.
Here's an example of one of the projects that they put together.
I'm Pastor Kim Reisdorf at the San Ramon Valley United Methodist Church.
I'm Supervisor Candace Anderson on the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors.
Hi, I'm Catherine Baker. I'm with the San Ramon Valley United Methodist Church.
And that is my hope and prayer today, that we will not only be able to do some service that makes a difference, but that we will leave here differently and think differently about our fellow brothers and sisters of
We had tried for years to get our congregations to work together more, even in service to the homeless and the homeless ministry that we ran between our different congregations. And it was just so difficult because it was so easy to get people to just organize with the folks that they knew within their own congregation. So to be able to get folks to be able to work together and purposefully getting folks of different faith traditions to work together in this way is an important piece as well. The other ministry that goes back to 1960, and when we began as a council of churches before becoming Interfaith in 1997, was our chaplaincy. At one point we had 5.5 full-time equivalents of chaplains serving in hospitals, the jails, and even a homeless chaplain in our county. And while all of the chaplaincies in the hospitals have become more professionalized, and we're grateful for that, we lost the contract in the county jail, but we still have an interfaith juvenile chaplain, both Reverend Julius Van Hook and others serving inside Juvenile Hall. Reverend Julius Van Hook started with us 3 or 4 years ago, and we just added Reverend Alexandria Spearman to be our assistant interfaith juvenile chaplain, and they've been training mentors to be able to work with young people inside Juvenile Hall and those that are touched by the juvenile justice system to be able to serve folks inside and out coming through those programs as well. This is Reverend Julius.
Good evening, everyone. Reverend Julius Van Hook here. Very excited to share with you this great update of our chaplaincy ministry, our juvenile chaplaincy ministry with Contra Costa County Probation Department. Oh, what a year it has been. our young people, just as the rest of the world, have been dead smack in the middle of this pandemic. And boy, I tell you, it has affected them, and some of them in ways unimaginable. Many of them were unable to see their families when visiting was completely stopped. And the letters and the cards and the notes that were sent in from our Pen Pal program that we established during this pandemic was such a great blessing to them, just to let them know that someone cared, someone is thinking about them and had them on their mind. We have had some other exciting things come forth. Our young people were able to express so many things during this pandemic about their fears and their worries and their concerns. You may see me today in my hoodie as opposed to my suit, shirt, and tie, or even my clergy collar that you may be used to seeing me in. But I'm standing in solidarity with Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, and many of the others that have been senselessly killed. These are the fears and concerns that grip our young people, who are many of our young people that are detained. And it is up to us to give them hope, to be a beacon of light and a presence of peace in their most trying times. Not only that, but to be with them with their joys and in their joys, and share with them in their times of happiness and times of celebration as well. I Change. I Change is something beautiful that has been birthed out of this chaplaincy ministry. And what we are truly doing as an interfaith chaplaincy, affirming a new generation of excellence. This generation that we're serving, we're affirming that they are amazing, that they're wonderful, that they're important, and that they can be whoever they want to be in life. This is what we seek to do, to bring them closer to the divine, to inspire them to dream and to live their best lives. This is what we have always done, and this is what we continue to endeavor to do.
Reverend Julius was at Alameda County as their juvenile chaplain before coming to our county. We have a social justice alliance. This is actually the group that actually helped us become interfaith, because they welcomed interfaith folks before the Council of Churches did, and kind of shamed us into becoming more than just the mainline Protestants, and welcoming Catholics and Mormons and New Thought Christians, oh my, as well as our Buddhist and Baha'i, Muslim and Jewish siblings as well. They do a lot of advocacy around housing, poverty, immigration, but also global issues around war and peace and justice as well. One of the subcommittees of our Social Justice Alliance is our Interfaith Climate Action Network, which this last year was calling for a sacred season of climate justice. They do a lot of work with California Interfaith Power and Light and Green Faith, and they provide resources for preaching during April and Earth Day, but also encouraging others to be able to decrease the carbon footprint in their congregations and be able to do some advocacy. And like I mentioned, with 5 refineries and all of the other polluting points, and one of the most polluted counties in California, we have a lot of issues of folks living near a lot of those polluting points. I took a small team to Line 3 last October, and we had a report back of what we learned on Line 3 in Northwest Minnesota, being with Native Americans, standing with them in some of their times to organize against Line 3. There's another group that's doing a lot of work around Line 5 in Michigan, and already preparing to try to keep Enbridge from pushing their way through native lands and treaty lands there, as well as they've caused irreparable harm to some of the aquifers on the Red Lake Nation and the White Earth Nation in northwestern Minnesota. We've had leaders like Chief Philip Scott, who's been a part of our retreats, as well as helping us grieve the stolen children that were in the Canadian and US residential schools. And so a lot of the work that we do is educational, but also reminding folks of who we are and how we belong to each other, especially in times of conflict and especially in times like COVID. Some of our I've mentioned the singing messengers. They started as the singing housewives in the 1960s that would go around to senior centers, and they broke the gender barrier and welcomed men in the 1970s or 80s. But we have 3 teams that go around to senior centers and share programs of music and humor for the folks of certain ages inside senior centers. And Jackie Wan was the director for like over 50 years of this group. And she was the second director. So we also do a lot of programs around gun violence, and sometimes showing films like this and reminding folks that the faith community can come together to be able to really address a lot of those things. But other times what we're doing is we're asking people to think about how they're praying at public events and giving advice on that, or doing interfaith dialogue that's a part of our meetings every month as we come together to be able to have those. And one of the things that we've been lifting up over the last couple of years is the importance of living by the platinum rule. For the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The assumption is that other people would like to be treated the way you would like to be treated. But being in a postmodern world, we find that the platinum rule is better, and it actually helps us live into this moment, to treat others the way they want to be treated. That means we have to get to know them. That means we have to actually ask them how they would want to be treated, such as, let me first understand what they want and then I'll give it to them, rather than just assuming. I love this quote. It's taken me 34 years to realize this, but the golden rule is wrong. It should be treat others how they want to be treated. That requires empathy. Everything else just assumes people want the same things that you want. Flipping the golden rule on its head, demanding that in order to get the most out of your relationship, you've got to love your partner the way they want to be loved, not just the way you want to be loved. And really getting to know each other's stories. And this is the benefit and really the blessing of interfaith, is that we can live in this present moment and we can recognize that the people we meet, even if they're the same people, going by the same name, may think of themselves in radically different ways the next time we may meet them, and to really honor the divine inside of them, including not giving hugs if they'd rather not have hugs, and being able to encourage folks to be able to live into interfaith relations in different ways. As I mentioned earlier, we've been doing a book study in our Meaningful Mondays, and we've asked different questions of each other as we think about this book, which is a great one I suggest to other interfaith councils and interfaith groups, because Barbara Brown Taylor, teaching a comparative religion class in a small liberal arts college in Georgia, really kind of takes us through a lot of what we learn in interfaith. What do you love about your faith? What do you struggle with? What do you admire about Judaism or Hinduism? Do you have a do-it-yourself project in your religion? And are there parts of your religious expressions that have similarities with others? What do you admire about others? What are you secretly envious of others as you talk to them? And then, of course, we have our own speakers and folks sharing at our annual meetings. Sometimes we co-sponsor regional groups like the Celebrate Diversity Consciousness Committee of the Rossmore Interfaith Councils. We've done and welcomed Eastern European Women's Group to some of the Understanding Ukraine events that we've done, and some of the solidarity work that we've done there. Some of the work that we've done with our Bay Area Interfaith Councils has been mostly around disaster relief. And we've taken tours of the San Francisco Emergency Management Center. We've thought and done training and programs with each other about how do we best live into encouraging our congregations to have emergency plans and to be ready for the big earthquake that we know can happen at any point. But we've also experienced a lot of wildfires in our regions and have had opportunity to welcome folks onto our church and congregational campuses from other parts of the Bay Area as they've been moved around and have had some of their homes destroyed as parts of that. And then, of course, some other programming that we've done is just disaster fairs and encouraging folks to get all of the information that they need. The latest one that we're working on is putting together public service announcements. And we got a grant from the United Religions Initiative, or actually all of our Bay Area Interfaith Councils were given a bequeathment of $10,000. And we've been debating over the last few years just how we want to work on this. And one of the things that we came up with is that we want to take some of these images from a response against an anti-Semitic hate flyering event that happened in Danville, and take pictures of the community response and the 700 people that came out in response to those hateful flyers, and take some of the experience that the Jewish community experienced there in Danville, and be able to share a bit about how the whole Bay Area faith community stands with those that are being targeted. And we're going to have one focused here with this Danville walk, and we're going to have one focused on Asian American Pacific Islander hate, because there's been a real big spike of that continues in San Francisco and in the Oakland Chinatown and other places. And then one on Islamophobia, and we're going to try to do these 3 public service announcements together, and start launching them both in a social media way, and encouraging local news stations to be able to share these messages around, so that people can see that the faith community is standing in solidarity with those that are being targeted by such hate. And as we are able to come together and share these messages, we're hoping that we'll be able to find funding to start doing some more. And we'll have the logos of all of the Bay Area Interfaith Councils and each of these regional groups that I've shown you that want to be a part of it as well. And this is Reverend Steve Harm, who's the current leader of Interfaith San Ramon Valley. He was president of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County in 1997 when Rabbi Dan Goldblatt, who's on the left there, came to start his ministry at Bethlehem Congregation. And he realized that he couldn't invite his Jewish friend to the Council of Churches. And that's what started our movement towards becoming an interfaith council. And so it's these relationships that are so important, and knowing the history of our region that really allows us to be able to live into this current moment. So with that little bit of history, I just wanted to share, open it up for conversation and see if there's other ideas that you may have for us, or things that this presentation may have sparked for you in your interfaith work, to see if there's other ways that people can work together. And Ruth, please share.
As someone once said, we'll have what you're having. I mean that seriously. This is just is such a sense around total kind of activity of interfaith that very few of us have been privileged to see or experience in our own communities. So hats off to you, number one. And I do have an idea for you.
Oh, great.
that you create a summer camp and you train the rest of us from other parts of the country to show how you develop these programs and what the steps were, and it could be, you know, best practices from everybody, but you clearly are really ahead in this field. And I think it would be amazing to have a place to go to where people could take, 10 days and study.
Oh, that's a great idea, Ruth. We do have a Catholic retreat center where we do a lot of our retreats called San Damiano. It's a Franciscan house that's in Danville, and it's beautiful with a great view of Mount D, Tuishtuk, as the Ohlone would call it. And that's a great idea, and we would be able to do that. They're a part of Interfaith San Ramon Valley, and they would probably love us to have a national conference in their space.
I think you could probably get I think you'd probably get the local interfaith communities to sponsor the person they're sending for the camp. And for people who are individuals not connected to it, maybe you could establish a scholarship fund if they needed to be covered. But listen, we bow to you. That's all I can say.
Well, I stand on the shoulders of a lot of other great workers, including my predecessor, Reverend Brian Steinweber, who just retired from his work at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, and hundreds of members that have rotated on and off of our elected council. And so the ideas really do kind of come up and bubble up from the ground to try to meet the needs in our community. And that's what our council's been about, even when it was the Council of Churches. There was camping ministries and a YMCA ministry way back in the 60s, but they were kind of cutting edge back then by actually overseeing student CPE chaplains, and kind of created the whole committees that would oversee some of that work.
Yeah, one last thing, I would suggest that when you do such a camp, I'm saying when you do, not if you do, that you have a special segment on documentation of activities, because part of the beauty of what you showed us today was the fact that you had photos from all those events. You had very effective special effects in your PowerPoints, and that's one area where people fall short because they don't have the know-how. And if they were a little tutored a little bit, maybe they could get better at that. But that's the other suggestion.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you.
And I'm signing up to go to that camp.
Oh, okay. And maybe you could do a workshop on your musical.
I'd love it, using the art.
I went to your musical workshop at the Salt Lake City Parliament.
Oh.
Did you want to share something, Stephen? You just looked like you had something right there on the tip of your tongue. Anyone else want to share any ideas or responses? Unmute yourself there, Sarah.
I would say that you have done an absolutely amazing job of covering such a wide variety of opportunities and excellence. This is really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, basically, that's what I was going to say too. I've been amazed at the number of projects that Will and the Contra Costa County Interfaith Council have going. I mean, they are really putting their hands where their mouths are. You know, with the big questions, we're talking. And I look at what Will is doing, and he's got his hands on so many things, and that I just really am amazed at how you can get all of these things coordinated. I know you work with others too, but you're such a good delegator, and you get people joining you, and partially it's because of your own, I think, powerful spirituality. You know, Jesus said, love God and love each other. And I think that there's a wholeness in the way that you do your work that really allows the celestial powers that be to work with you. And they're just, I believe that they're just standing all around, these celestial powers. They're just waiting for somebody like you to come along and say, here's my hands. And,
a lot of what I do is networking with folks and then giving them permission to do the things that they feel called to do, and then helping them with it. I try not to take it over,
right,
but try to train folks up.
I see that, and that's a special an ability in itself.
But because we're a larger county, and with all of our kind of microclimates, like the West County and GRIP, Greater Richmond Interfaith Program, it's probably one of the oldest interfaith groups, including Rossmore Interfaith Council. Both started in the late 60s. And GRIP in Richmond is still doing homeless ministry and a lot of other work there in the city of Richmond. So each of these zones are kind of divided by these two mountain ranges, and then a lot of traffic. And so it's one of the reasons why our county has so many different micro groups that do their own interfaith programming. And then we, as the county, help them with their own programming and publicize it as much as we can to help others know what's going on in the county and what the needs are in the county.
Yeah.
And then, of course, connecting with all of the other interfaith councils in the Bay Area, and they each have different expertise as well. The Marin Interfaith Council has a group actually doing climate adaptation. and doing some really good work on becoming more prepared to live in different ways given the climate breakdown we're living in. Any other responses or ideas that come to mind from what we're doing? Have any of your groups done PSAs, public service announcements? That's a cutting edge for us, and we found a videographer who's in the faith community that's going to spend some time with us. And fortunately, we have this money from the award that we got from the URI at the national conference they held at Stanford a few years ago. But it's really taken us 3 or 4 years of really talking about how would we want to spend this money. And some of us thought we should just do it on disaster preparedness trainings and maybe even a little infrastructure on that. But when we've had all of these hate crimes over the last few years, we really felt like we needed to have a unified response against those. And something that's regional, it's not just our own county, but all of our different interfaith councils, logos being at the end and showing up for each other really kind of felt like the best way. So we're really in the midst of that. We hope to have something to present at the 2023 Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago next summer. And hopefully we'll be able to talk to you more about that process in a workshop there. Well, before we, if that's all of our sharing, I do have a short video from Victor Kazanjian, who gave the keynote at our annual meeting online a few weeks ago that I'd like to share with you. So let me get that queued up here so that can be something that's shared, because calling on the resources that you have in your own backyard is an important piece as well. And having Victor give this speech at this time was a really important piece for us. So, and we're actually going to be having Michael Pappas, the executive director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, give a keynote at our fundraising dinner later this year. And so this is also a great way to interact with others nearby interfaith councils as well, and to be able to share the leadership that we have with each other.
Greetings, sisters and brothers of I4C. And thank you so much, Carolyn, Will, members of the governing board and elected council, and all members of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County for inviting me to speak with you this evening. The Interfaith Council is now one of almost 1,100 URI cooperation circles in 110 countries around the world. As the Interfaith Council was one of URI's first cooperation circles at its founding in 2000, it's a particular honor for me to be with you this evening for your annual meeting. On behalf of URI, we also offer our congratulations to the Interfaith Council's Making a Difference awardees, as well as to the newly elected members of the elected council and the governing board. The Interfaith Council's work through extraordinary programs like Interfaith Election Healing, Meaningful Monday, Confronting Systemic Racism Together, and iCare reflects the extraordinary work being done by I4C and URI's cooperation circles around the world, working to make a difference in their communities. Thank you for all your important work, and particularly in these most challenging times. We are certainly living in such a complicated time in this country and in our world. These past 4 years and these past 4 days have tested and tried the heart and soul of America. Mostly, I have found myself deeply sad, angry at times, but mostly sad about the loss of life, livelihood, liberties, human rights, equal rights, civility, rationality, perspective, connection, and community. The loss of trust in elected officials and political and judicial systems, and the apparent loss of the dream of a unified, beloved community. That's a lot of loss. And this loss transcends political affiliation. That much loss is traumatic for individuals, communities, and societies. And the resulting trauma, which is similar to that of growing up in a household with a violently abusive parent, if left untreated, leads to sickness and psychosis. We are living in a traumatized country, rife with social sickness and societal psychosis that is evoking alienation and isolation, leading some to despair and depression, and others to fear and rage. This social sickness has been provoked by, and I would say carefully crafted, by a group of anti-democracy politicians who believe this to be the way to manipulate enough of the general population for their own selfish ends. There is precedent for this. It is straight out of the dictator's playbook in places like Nazi Germany, British ruled India, and apartheid South Africa. As a grandchild of the Armenian genocide, it would be a betrayal of my family's legacy if I were to fail to speak to this rise of totalitarianism in the United States, a situation that has historically preceded mass atrocities and even genocides around the world. The common theme of these moments of madness, historical and contemporary, is the manipulation of people who have experienced great loss. This manipulation works because when grief goes unattended, that grief then becomes grievance, grief to grievance. And it is grievance that then is manipulated. In our country, our grief from the losses we feel has turned to grievance for many, and it is that which we must address if we are to begin a process towards healing and transformation. What has struck me as particularly important in this time of history for our work of peace building and justice seeking in interfaith movements such as URI and I4C is that the power behind our work is less about politics and strategy than it is about relationships, connection, and consciousness. After 3 decades of work as a community organizer, educator, and grassroots activist, I have become convinced that without the power provided by love, compassion, and empathy, the most sophisticated strategies for social change are but hollow branches bracing against the furious winds of injustice and violence. Alienation, isolation, fear, and rage are what fuels violence, and violence against people or planet requires dehumanization and objectification. We know this in both interpersonal and geopolitical contexts. To harm you, to violate your humanity, I must first dehumanize you, turning you into an object to be used for my ends. That has been the whole strategy behind the Trump movement, to dehumanize large portions of the population of this country and the world, so that his followers will not consider the humanity of others, and will objectify the earth so that they can continue to rape and pillage the planet. Therefore, I would submit that the essential component of all interfaith peace building and justice seeking is the rehumanizing, de-objectifying power of love, compassion, and empathy. In spiritual terms, it is making sacred, once again, that which has been desecrated. Dr. Howard Thurman, mystic and teacher in the African American Christian tradition, and my spiritual mentor, speaks to this process in this poem about wholeness. He writes, "There is a sense of wholeness at the core of humanity that must abound in all we do, that marks with reverence our every step, that has its sway when all else fails, that wearies out all evil things, that warms the depths of frozen fears, making friend of foe, and lasts beyond the living and the dead, beyond the goals of peace, the ends of war. This we seek through all our years, to be complete and of one piece within and without. Weary out all evil things, warm the depths of frozen fears, make friend of foe. Seek to be complete and of one piece within and without. That is what we are challenged to do today. To go beyond familiar conversations about the divisions of red and blue states and changing the political landscape through merely instrumental means, and open, gently open to the places of loss, pain, and grief with actions that are based on the values of love, compassion, and empathy, and are rooted in the spiritual principles that ground our common life on this planet. Albert Einstein spoke of such a process. He wrote these words reflecting on the death of a child, of a dear friend. A human being is spatially and temporally limited piece of the whole world, what we call the universe. That person experiences themselves, their thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of their consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison, restricting us from our own desires and affection to a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. The quest for liberation, he writes, from this bondage is the only object of true religion. This then is our task. It starts by cultivating meaningful and connected human relationships in which people of different backgrounds, whether this be cultural, religious, political, gender, or any identity-based, forge strong bonds of connection and become living witnesses to the power of love, compassion, and empathy, to heal great loss and create cultures and communities of peace, justice, and healing. This is what we do in URI, nurture circles of peace, justice, and healing in which people create and sustain daily, enduring interfaith and intercultural relationships based on principles like equity, hospitality, kindness, compassion, empathy, and love. This is what you do in I4C. In the face of the trauma of the last days, months, and years, in the face of the trauma of decades and indeed centuries of injustice, that has disproportionately dehumanized women, people of color, ethnic and religious minorities, indigenous peoples, members of the LGBTQIX community. In the face of the trauma that we continue to inflict upon the earth, in the face of the trauma of the losses that we each carry in our bodies and souls, let us follow Thurman's call to wholeness and Einstein's call for liberation from bondage, by widening our circles of compassion for all humanity, for all living beings, and for the earth, our mother, and to seek completeness within and without. If we in the interfaith movement do this, then this movement of which we are a part will be fully energized to transform a struggling world into a truer reflection of the wholeness that lies at the center of all creation. My sisters and brothers, may the power of love infuse purpose into our actions, that we may be part of expanding the reality of the peace that we know in our hearts to this precious planet and its beloved inhabitants. May peace prevail in your community. May peace prevail on earth.
Beautiful.
What is his name again, Will?
Reverend Victor Kazanjian. He is no longer the executive director of the URI. They just hired a new person.
Do you know the new person?
Joel Smith. I don't know him, but he sounds like a wonderful person that's done amazing work all over the world, including addressing landmines and other forms of peacemaking around the world. So, yeah. So, you know, we have a lot of resources in our own backyard if we are willing to share them or invite them to be a part of what we're doing. So that was part of what I was trying to share today, is that our partners are there with us, and as we can inspire ourselves, let's invite others to inspire us as well. So Thanks so much, everyone.
You inspire.
God
Will.
bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.